I'm up here to introduce my amazing mother, who I know is not just a mother to me, but a mother to this entire house. I will admit, when I was a kid, I would say littler, but when I was a kid, I was really jealous of people calling my parents mom and dad other than me and my siblings. I hated it. I was so mad. It's not your mom and dad, it's my mom and dad. I remember one instance in particular. My mom chaperoned one of my field trips for school. And one of the girls there was just hanging all over my mom, calling her mom. I wish you were my mom, and can you adopt me? And you're my mom. I'm going to call you mom today. And I hated her. I just gave her the stink eye the whole time. That's my mom. I was like 8 years old, guys. Give me a little slack. It's my mom. But you know what's weird is in that moment, I felt this sort of subtle peace. And God kind of drew me back. Let her have this. Let this little girl have this for just this day. Years later, I found out that girl was raised in an abusive household. And my mom was the only godly mother example that she ever had. And so I want to thank my mom for raising an entire church, because now I am genuinely happy and blessed to call every single one of you my family. As a direct result of the obedience that my parents have shown in raising an amazing, fine church that I am just so happy and proud to call family. So please welcome to the stage my incredible, wonderful, amazing mother. She's not crying yet, so I need to keep going.
Every time the Bible speaks of a great victory or prosperity, it came after a great battle. We all like to look at the highs, and we all like to look at the victories, and I want the victory, but none of us like to look at, I know we've talked about it before, but all of it came after a struggle, after a battle. In fact, usually the greater the battle, the greater the victory, because there was more to overcome. Unfortunately, we all like to skip the battle part, the warfare part, the enemy part. We just want to get to the victory. And even when we look at other people's lives, we look at their victories. And even, let's face it, we've all heard people's testimonies, and we see how amazing their life is, and we're like, why can't I have that? And then when we get reminded of the battle they went through, we're like, yeah. But I want that. The problem is that the yeah part, that's the part that led them to that. But we only like that part of it. God would never do that to me. Why not? He did it. He did it, but the enemy did it to them. He attacked them. But it's out of that place of victory that we gain authority. So I looked at, and we were talking about Passover. That was the other. I got two words in my spirit, and that was transitions and Passover. We've been talking about Passover. We've been talking about the blood. I mean, what more struggle than the cross, right, for Jesus to have a great victory? But a transition is a passage from one state to the other. It is not just in a place, but it can be also an emotional thing or a relational thing. You're going from one stage to another stage. A movement, a development, an evolution from one form to another, from one style to another. It also can mean transfiguration, which I'll get to in a minute. Okay, so even Jesus, we're going to follow Jesus through some transitions in his life, because we look at Jesus and we praise him, and the songs that I pick were really focusing on, so I guess the music kind of went there, it didn't spark me at the moment, was his name and how beautiful, and you can do only what you do it all. It's all about you. It's in your name. It's in who you are. And I know Rob has talked about this, and it's not that the other songs aren't great, because we need prayer. Some songs are prayer. Some songs are worship. Some songs are praise. Some songs are giving us courage to storm through the battle. And when you look through the Psalms of David, some of his songs were just exalting God, and some of him, Psalms mean songs, guys. Some of his songs were prayers, like, God help me. I need you. But in praising and worshiping, and only you, what can you do? Who are you? We exalt you. It's when our eyes are on him that the rest of the things in our life can begin to make sense and fall into place. So he went through many transitions, and he went through many changes. He went from heaven, he went from the ultimate transition, from a place of glory and heaven and at the right hand of the Father, to a manger, which is a fancy way for saying a feed trough. And that's a horrible transition. We like to think of transitions as like a good thing. I'm transitioning into a better place. He went from like the best place ever to an animal's food dish, literally. I don't even like to change my animal's food dish, let alone, like I'm going to lay my baby in there. Blah. Have you ever seen slobbery dog water? It's nasty. See, you've seen it. You're all like, ugh. Now that's where they put Jesus, only it wasn't slobbery dog water. It was where slobbery cows and horses ate. Worse than your dog, right? Even though my dog is close to being a horse. It's gross. It's gross. So he did that transition first. And then he transitioned into being an obedient child. From being the king of the universe, which he still was, to his mother telling him to clean his room. I don't want to do that. Although I'm sure Jesus had a better attitude. But it was in his places of that, by man's standards, he lost everything. It transitioned him into the place that he needed to be so that he could die for you and me. It was the thing that positioned him to do what he was called to do. But by all natural perspective, it was a demotion. It was a step down. So sometimes we go through transitions that make us look like it's a step down. Like I was here and now I'm jacked and I'm here. And how can this be God? Because if it was God, shouldn't it be a step up? But sometimes we have to take a step down to take a step up. Joseph did the same thing. He lived in his father's house, was wealthy. He was a rancher. He had prestige. He had 12 sons. And then he went to being a slave. Then he went to being a prisoner. Those were demotions, not promotions, but they were demotions because had he not been in the prison, he would have never prophesied to the baker and the cupbearer, and he would have never become second in the nation. But who in their right mind here would believe that going to prison is the very step that was going to get you to be second in command of a nation? Looks like a demotion. As a matter of fact, Shekinah actually did say something to me along those lines. She came into the shop yesterday, and I'm going to steal a line that she said that she was listening to a blog from Stephen Furtick, so I will give credit where credit is due. But it slips right in there. He was talking about pursuing dreams, and so many times we pursue our dreams and our eyes are on the dream as opposed to pursuing God. And we do, like we have an entire society, and it's good. Okay, don't get me wrong. Let's have a plan. Like, where are we going? What is our goal, our end goal, our dream? Where do you want to be in, the next phase of your life? But he pointed out that you get so focused, you get so fixated on the end goal instead of what God's calling you to do, that we go about the end goal incorrectly because we do it in the natural. Or you can start to step on people because the goal becomes your God. Because that's what God's called me to do. And so, even if it's a God thing, so I'm aiming at the goal as opposed to aiming at God. And when she said that, it was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. If I follow God, it's in following God. She said, don't pursue, I'm probably butchering it, but in pursuing God, instead of your dreams pursue you. That you'll end up where God, in other words, you'll end up where God wanted you to be by pursuing him, not by pursuing the end game. So Joseph had a dream that he was going to be ruling the nation. But he followed God and granted some of his flesh, and he got him. When he tried to pursue his dream, he pissed off his brothers and ended up in prison. When he pursued God by being an excellent prisoner, by being an excellent slave, he was pursuing God. I can guarantee you that in his mind, he wasn't thinking, I'm going to be second in. He had probably forgotten about the dream about being the leader of a nation because he's like, that's not happening, I'm in jail. But he was pursuing God. Well, I'm going to be the best me in jail I can be, which ultimately led to his dream coming to pass. God's dreams, when she said that, and again, I added to it and twisted it, but it was the same concept, yes? But in Jesus, I came to save mankind, but he had to take a step down. He had to go to a manger. He had to say, yes, Mom and Dad. He had to be persecuted by the Pharisees. All of that led to his goal. Even the people were like, we were looking for a king. What is this? This is a carpenter. This is a nobody. So it's not that it wasn't that Joseph's dream wasn't accurate, and it's not that I'm saying it's bad to pursue your dreams, because you should have dreams and you should have visions and you should have goals. The problem is when we seek those in our strength as opposed to seeking God. Because when we seek God, what he ultimately called us to will come to pass, and it's never the path that we think it should have taken. The children of Israel wandered. Again, sometimes it's our own disobedience, but it's where we build character sometimes, in our punishment place, in our wilderness place. It's never the path that we think makes sense to us. I have yet to know somebody that was like, this is my goal and I'm going here, and it looked exactly like they mapped it out. But they have to have a goal. Like Rob has said that. Like, you have to have, if you aim at nothing, that's what you're going to get, is nothing. So again, I'm not speaking against having goals. We should have goals. But our goals shouldn't be more important than what Jesus said today for us to do today, even if what he said for us to do today looks opposite of where the goal's going. I know that sounded going around in circles, but did that make sense? All right. So every place, like I said, that the enemy tries to battle you is a place of learning and growing. All things work together for good to them that love the Lord. So Joseph being in prison was a very vehicle that led to him achieving his dream and his goal of being a leader of a nation. But again, not one of us. I mean, we can look and read the Bible and go, oh, it makes perfect sense. But let's face it, the guy's in jail. Nobody, including himself, was thinking, so like tomorrow, like I'm going to interpret this guy's dream, and tomorrow I'm going to be leading the nation. It took a little longer than that, but you get my point. Like, that doesn't make sense. How many times have we sat somewhere in our life and said, this circumstance doesn't make sense. I don't know how this could get me there, And I've talked many times of there's crazy things, horrible, terrible things actually that have happened in my life, but that led me to this moment. Christina mentioned that we've been backstabbed and whatever. No, it's not about that. But it was those things that led me here. And if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't have this. Even with my own kids, I went through miscarriages, etc. If I'd have had kids when I thought I wanted to have kids, I wouldn't have the kids that I have now. And I think they're pretty cool. All right, we'll keep you. But my plan looked totally different. My plan looked like having kids 5 years before I had kids. And let me tell you, if I'd have had the kids that I wanted to have 5 years earlier, they would not have turned out like that. They'd have been really jacked up. Not that my kids, because I was really jacked up. Rob and I were not in any position to be raised. God's like, not the right timing. And I'm like, no, it's the right timing. And God's like, no. I love you too much to give you what you're having a tantrum about. All right? So what does that transition look like? So another transition that Jesus went through, and I'm going to read through Matthew 4, 1 through 11. And sometimes this is an example of going through a transition alone. Jesus went through this transition all by himself. Some battles we go through with people, some battles it's just you and Jesus. You and the Holy Spirit. All right, so Matthew 4, 1 through 11. It says, then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Oh, let me backtrack a little bit. Okay, so Jesus gets baptized by John the Baptist, right? Most of you know that story. And he has this glorious, awesome movie moment, right? He comes up out of the water. A dove comes flying in, lands on him, and a voice thundering from heaven. Y'all can picture this movie scene. This is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased. Angel singing. Everything's like, wow, that's a cool moment, right? And so something glorious and amazing is going to happen right now. And then it says, after this glorious, amazing, and this is my beloved son. Scene 2, as he gets walked into the wilderness to meet the devil. You're thinking he's going to enter a palace. There's going to be, all this amazing. No. It says, and then, now, Matthew 4, 1 through 11. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Who led him into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil? The Holy Spirit. And then to top it all off, there's this glorious moment. This is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased. Enter the wilderness and the devil. And then to top it all off, when he had fasted. A lot of us picture that through the 40 days he was getting these temptations. No. It says, When he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, afterwards he was hungry. I'm sorry, I'd have been hungry after like 6 hours, I'm just saying. 40 days and 40 nights he's fasting. So this big, glorious, amazing moment. How many of you guys have gotten this prophetic word and it's amazing? You're going to go to the nations. You're called to do miracles. You're called to do amazing things. And Monday morning, all hell breaks loose in your life. You're welcome. And all the people that are telling you that, it's you know, some people are like, oh my gosh, you got such an amazing word. And you're like, no. That's not what it feels like. I learned that very early when we stepped into more of a personal prophetic thing, and I'd learned the warfare that comes with the word, and then somebody would give me a word and everybody else would be jealous and they'd be like looking at me and being, if you haven't got a prophetic word, you're okay. Don't freak. It's all right. You have some peace right now. Enjoy it. Not saying it won't happen, but people be like, oh my gosh, every time you go to a Kim Clement meeting, you get a word. And I'm like, no. And they're looking at me like I'm insane because I, at this point, have learned there is warfare involved with that word. And all hell's going to break through in my life. And they're all excited. And I'm like, I don't want to despise prophetic utterance, but eesh. I mean, I would hide in the back of me. Like, nope. And then I hear other people go, I never get a word. I'm like, you're okay. You're fine. You're fine. So, happened with Jesus. Totally biblical. Where does it say that in the Bible? Right there. Jesus was now hungry. Any of you experienced being hangry? You're tired, you're hangry, you're going to kill people. All right. Very poetically. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, afterwards he was hungry. In my world, he was hangry. Now, when the tempter came to him, so it was after he was already tired, he's already hungry, he's been in the desert for 40 days, he's already got to be questioning, like, really? Like God said, I'm his beloved son. How the heck is this beloved? I'm in the stinking desert. And then Satan, after he's already tired, he's already hungry, I'm sure he's already wore out. The first temptation is, if you are, questioning the very word, if you are the Son of God, turn those stones and make them become bread. But he answered and he said, it is written. He came back with the word. This is why it's so important to know the word. When the enemy comes to tempt you, when the enemy comes to twist the word that was given to you, do you know the word to battle with the word? But he answered and said, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. All right. I'd have been like, you're right, one little piece of bread's not going to hurt anything. And then I will be better equipped to fight the enemy because I will have regained my strength. Come on, y'all know you would do that. I'm not the only unholy person. Then the devil took him up to the holy city, set him on the pinnacle of the temple, and said to him, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he shall give his angels charge over you, and in their hands they will bear you up, lest you dash your foot against the stone. So he was basically telling him, so if you really are God, God will protect you. So do something stupid, because God will protect you. Again, Jesus doesn't fight him with anything but the word, and he says, it is written. How many of us know the word well enough that when the enemy comes against us, we can go, it is written. Nope, the word says. The word says. That's what defeats the enemy. No. The word says, you shall not tempt the Lord your God. Devil doesn't give up easy, guys. How many times have you been in a battle and it keeps coming back and it keeps coming back and it keeps coming back because he's trying to wear you down? I'm not a big sports person, but my dad used to watch boxing all the time growing up. And what did if the boxer wasn't better, if he was tough enough, he could wear the other guy out. If I keep going, if I can wear him out long enough, then I'll have my fight because I'll have worn out my opponent. All right? I just gotta wear him out. Again, the devil took him up on an exceedingly high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, all these things will be given to you if you fall down and worship me. Then Jesus said to him, away with you, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. Then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and ministered to him. All right, so there's 2 points that I want to make with this last scripture. One of them is that Jesus is the King of Kings. He was promised the kingdoms of the earth, right? So it was a God promise that he would have those things. Satan didn't tempt him with anything that wasn't already promised to him. What Satan did was Satan offered him a shortcut. If you worship me, I'll give you all this. Now, Jesus knew that the cross laid between him and the kingdoms. But Satan was like, let me give you the easy way. If you worship me, you can have what you're called to have. Again, just like the little piece of bread, we would justify the little piece of bread. If I have a little piece of bread, if I turn just one stone into a rock, I will build, and it's for good purposes, right? It will build me up so I'm strong enough to fight. Still opposite the word of God, but we justify it. On this one, well, I'm called to be King of Kings. I'm called to have these kingdoms, but I can have it now, and I can start doing good now. I can forfeit the struggle and the trial and have it now. Okay? Some of you either didn't catch that or you're like, crap, I got to go the hard way. I have a feeling some of you caught the fact that the shortcut's what you were contemplating in your mind. But it's what God wanted for me. So I'm going to use this ungodly method to get what God wanted. And honestly, there's a lot of churches, a lot of ministries, a lot of people, a lot of business people that take the shortcut route to get what's been promised them, because that goes back to their dream was so important that they're like, I'm going to take a shortcut so that I can get to my dream faster, so I can do good faster, so I can be where God wanted me faster. Except that's not the path that God told you about. If any of you guys have watched Lord of the Rings, it was the shortcut of the ring being evil. But I'm going to use the evil ring for good purposes, so it's okay. Nope. Just turned him evil. Those of you that haven't watched Lord of the Rings, what's wrong with you? All right. It's okay. I converted Jackie. I finally talked her into watching. She's like, oh my gosh, I get it now. We should have movie night. That's 9 hours worth of movies, guys. Woohoo! All right. They pursued, everybody was trying to convince themselves that the evil could be used for good. Guys, evil cannot be used for good. But that's what Satan was trying to tell Jesus. If you do it the shortcut, you'll rule the kingdoms faster. We've all been tempted with that moment. Whether it's in a personal relationship, whether it's in our business, whether it's in our ministry, whether it's getting married too fast, whether it's marrying the wrong person because God called me to be married. This person's in front of me. I'm just going to marry this person. God promised me a marriage. Have fun with that one. And that's inconvenient for me because I do the marriage counseling around here, and then I don't have time for all of that. So save me the trouble of an extra marriage counseling session, all right? Let's do it right the first time. All right. Now, it doesn't always work that way. I'm just playing. I'm not trying to put people, I'm not going to ask her to help me with my marriage. That's not what I'm saying. But if you have the option to do it right to begin with, let's slow it down and do it right the first time, all right? All right. If you're already there, God has grace. We've all messed up. Let's work with what we've got. Huh? We've all messed up. Not just in our marriage, in life. Carlos and Blanca, do we need to have an appointment? Our interpreter is, if you didn't know, it's her husband is the interpreter. It's okay, Blanca, we can have an appointment. It's all right, it's all right. We'll talk after. All right. Wow. Anyway. So then, all right. I think you got my point there, right? But that transition that Jesus went through, he went through all alone. He didn't take any of the disciples. He didn't take anybody with him. It was him, God, 40 days in the wilderness. And if those of you that are saying, I must not be holy because I keep having tribulations, or I keep having trials, this is Jesus. You can't get more holy than that. He did not open up any doors for that attack to come against him. It was part of what helped him build and transition into what he was supposed to be, okay? The devil never gives up. Now, he comes out of that, you think, woohoo, I survived 40 days, I survived with hunger, I survived with fasting, I resisted the devil, and he fled, because it says at the end that Satan finally left him alone for that moment. And then he goes in and he starts healing people, and he brings together the disciples, and he's raising them up and training them up, and people are still complaining, and they're still criticizing him, and the Pharisees are still attacking him, and they're still slandering him, and they're still trying to throw rocks at him, and they're still trying to kill him, and he's like, I'm just trying to do the will of my Father. He could have been like most of us. Didn't you hear back here that I am the Son of God? And God is well pleased, so get it together, people. No, he just kept doing what he needed to do, even when people were slandering him, even when people were trying to kill him, even when people, like his whole life was a test. He'd go in the square, he'd be teaching in the temple, and people would be like, what about this? Well, what about down to the taxes. Well, we shouldn't talk about politics. Really, that was like one of the first things they asked Jesus in the temple. So what do you think? Should we pay our taxes?
Yes.
You say no.
Sorry, Jesus said yes. He didn't bother to ask him, is it fair or unfair, or should you or shouldn't you? Give to Caesar what Caesar's. He wasn't arguing the point. He did talk politics. They persecuted him politically, socially, religiously. He got attacked on every level. He was the outcast. And then he goes, and now we're going to hit another transition, or a different word for transition is transfiguration. And that was in Matthew 17, 1 and 2. And it said, this time he took 3 people with him, even not even all 12. There are some times where there are seasons where you only need Jesus only dealt with his intimate, right? And you'd think, well, all 12 of them were. And I've said this before. How many of you think that his 12, we get jealous, like, well, she spent time with so-and-so instead of spent time with me, or they invited all those people, but they didn't invite me. Jesus has his 12 disciples. He's with them all the time and says, you 3, you come with me. What were the other 9 doing in the camp? Well, how come Jesus picked them? How come they got to go? How come we didn't get to go? Because there's certain seasons that you just need who you need. It's who God ordained to be there. Okay? So he picks Peter, James, and John, takes them up, led them to the mountain by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. Another movie moment, his face shone. He was like the sun. His clothes became brilliant white. He's transfigured. I didn't have the rest of it, but, they're all stumbling over themselves, going, oh my gosh, should we build monuments? Like Elijah and Moses appeared, and they're like, oh my gosh. Again, you think this is an amazing moment, and they're going to go down, and it's going to be amazing. And then they're going down, and Jesus says, shh, don't tell anybody. He didn't say, let everybody know who I am. He said, shh, not till later. They don't need to know this. It was a personal transition. Sometimes you go through stuff, and you're like, why doesn't anybody know? And God's like, shh, there's more battle coming, and you don't need more warfare. Sometimes the more people know, the more warfare there is. Let me tell you, you get a word about, let's just pick money, because like Rob says, it's everybody understands money. You're going to be a millionaire. And it's public, and you have this like life-altering moment with God, and then tomorrow you're broke. Sorry. You won't be. And then people are around. It brings more warfare. I thought you got a word that you were going to have XYZ. What's that, millionaire? You can't even go to lunch with us after church. Now, not only is your own brain messing with you, but now the people, your friends around you, are like, you don't look like no millionaire to me. Some of it's because they doubt God, and some of it's because they're jealous. Warfare you don't need. The people already hated Jesus. He didn't need anything more at that moment. That wasn't the time for it. What did he do? He said, shh, stop. He had this glorious moment, stop. And then he went in and basically went back to what he was doing before. The very next passage talks about him going out, healing a boy. He goes back into ministry, where again, he's still being persecuted. He's still being challenged. He's still being attacked. And he keeps doing what he's doing. His disciples, at one point, it says most everybody left him. And he looks at his disciples like, are y'all leaving me too? And they're like, where else are we going to go? Not, no, we love you passionately, Jesus. How could we ever leave you? It's like, well, we're staying because there's nowhere else to go. How many of you would feel loved at that moment? Right? Like all your friends abandon you, and the few friends you have left are like, there really isn't anywhere else to go. We're kind of homeless, and that's you or nothing. Let's face it, we're all not that holy. We'd all be like, y'all can go too then. So Jesus continued persecution. All right? So we've been focusing on Passover and its importance. It was a transition where people, the firstborn in every household, were killed before they entered into freedom. But their freedom, woohoo, we're free, led into more warfare, led into, just like Jesus wandering in the wilderness. For them it was 40 years instead of 40 days. Look at how prophetic God is, that Jesus had to wander 40 days representing the 40 years of transition. I'm free, my people are free to go wander in the wilderness. We don't like that. We don't like those seasons in our life. So, when the Israelites originally experienced Passover, it was a moment of woohoo, and now the wilderness. This is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased, and into the wilderness. All right? Nobody thinks that those things would lead them to greatness, to become a great nation, to ultimately get to the point where, they had Israel established, and they became, and to this day, one of the most amazing nations in the world. It is a nation the size of 1/10 of the county of 1/10 of the size of California. It's like San Diego County, basically. Is the entire country, guys, and they're leaders in medicine. They're leaders in warfare. I'm sorry, there's countries that have far greater military, and they still don't take on Israel. Israel's like this big, guys. It's because they have the blessing of God on their hand. Those of you that have been, we went, you can literally tell you're in Israeli blessed God territory. I am now in Arab territory. You can, not just can you feel it, you can see it. It goes from blessed land to desolate land. And am I exaggerating? It's literally like this. Israel is your blessed, blessed, blessed. What the heck, where'd this blessing go? And I'm talking about physical steps, not spiritual steps. Physical steps, okay? God bless them, but my point is that all of these thousands of years later, it took them going through this to be who they are now. So we are very tunnel vision. We only look at our moment. We only look at this can't possibly lead to anything, where it's following the obedience of God and the transitions that he takes us to. Even when we have a high point, the enemy will try to make it a low point, but we just need to keep going on with what God called us to do. It looked like a low point. So much so that they're wandering in the wilderness and the Israelites kept going, can we go back now? I know it was slavery, but at least we knew it. It was slavery, but it wasn't wandering. I don't see a goal. I don't see a vision. You keep telling us about this promised land, but all I see is desert. How many of you have felt that place in your life? You know that your life needs to go somewhere. You know God called you to something, but right now all you see is desert. Whether it's of your own doing, because Israel was there because of their own doing, or whether it's because, like Jesus, you were led into that place to build you up, to strengthen you. It's not because Jesus led you into that place to tear you down, by the way. How do you work out? How do you build muscle? You go through a tearing down to build it up. Okay? So it wasn't God being cruel to Jesus. It was he was building something and being an example for us to follow, that when we're going through trials, it's a transition to build something. All right? Jesus came as the Passover lamb that was slain for the freedom of the people. That includes you and me. We were all born into sin and bondage. And just like Israel, we had to partner with God by following his instructions. We have to leave the past behind us and follow out by the Holy Spirit. We need to be a partner with God when we're freed from these bondages. We need to follow God's instructions. Israel wanted to turn back. We want to turn back, and we can't. Jesus paid the price for our freedom. He did the hard part, but we have to follow him. And that doesn't always look pretty. There's a passage that says, and I don't have it on there, it says, a student is not greater than his teacher. Well, if Jesus went through hell in a handbasket to give us our freedom, what makes us think that we just get the easy, peachy way? It's not that he doesn't want to. It's not that he doesn't love us. It's that we're in a world with a very real devil, and he doesn't give up. So you can be doing everything. Jesus was doing everything right, and Satan still attacked him. He wasn't not anointed. He wasn't not blessed. In fact, Jesus doesn't promise to get us out of our troubles. Psalms 23, which most of us know, if you've never even been in a church, if you've gone to a funeral. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. He doesn't promise to get you out of the valley of the shadow of death, to take a shortcut, to go around it, over it, under it. It says walk through it. Because that's where the feast comes, in the midst of your enemies. Well, if you're in the midst of your enemies, you have to go through it. We want to take a shortcut and go around it. We want to take a shortcut and go over it. We want to stop it. We want to go back. We're in the valley of the shadow of death. We're like, just kidding. I'm going to go this way. Just kidding. Or God doesn't love me because I'm in the middle of this warfare. But it's in the middle of that warfare that the triumph comes. By walking through it, not around it. Or what most of us do, honestly, the vast majority of people, this actually just popped in my head. Lance Wallnau talks about there's only like 20% of people that hit convergence. Do you know why that is? Because the vast amount of people get to the edge of the valley of the shadow of death and like, yeah, no. Too much. It's easier. Now, does God love you? Have you lost your salvation? No. But you're not going to get to your victory because your victory is on the other side of the valley of shadow of death. Because you will feast in the midst of your enemies before them in there, not out here. And we're like, I want to have victory in the midst of my enemies out here. And God's like, I'm sorry, your enemies are in there, so you got to go in there. And we're like, but I want to serve you out here. And the vast majority of believers, unfortunately, will always love Jesus from out here and looking in. Be like, yeah, my victory's way in there, and it ain't worth it. Does God love you? Yes, but will you ever achieve what he's called you to achieve on this earth and be truly fulfilled on this earth? Probably not, because your victory's out there. And you see that there's not one example of anybody in the Word, not one example of anybody that achieved their victory, reached their goal, reached their calling without going through. Not one. There's not. So we're like, if God loved me, if I'm really called, I wouldn't be going through all this warfare. No, that's not true. Because you're called, because there's an attack, that's why you're going through all this warfare. In fact, if you're not going through anything at all, I mean, some of it is self-induced, don't get me wrong. We have to evaluate our life. If you're, in a ridiculous hot mess of sin, okay, yes. But just because there's an attack means that Satan's trying to prevent you from getting to that goal. Just like when the Israelites went into Israel and were trying to take their land, what happened? Giants came and fought them. Would they have ever gotten the land if they hadn't have fought the giants? Did the giants attack them because they weren't where they were supposed to be? The giants attacked them because they were where they were supposed to be. If they'd have stayed out of Israel, the land of Israel anyways, because it wasn't Israel yet, the giants wouldn't have attacked them. The attack came because they were where they were supposed to be, not the other way around. And what we look at is, I'm being attacked, so I must not be in God's plan, as opposed to, this is God's plan, and so Satan's trying to push me back out. So when they went in, they could have why did they wander for 40 years? Because that's what the first group of people did. Yeah. They went in and they're like, we're like grasshoppers in their eyes. We'll wait out here. Maybe they'll just all die off. The second group, after 40 years of wandering, went, nuh-uh, we are well able. We're going to take these guys. Here we go. And it was still a fight. What we want is God to take care. Could you just kill them all for me, and then I'll come in and take the spoils? That doesn't happen that way. It does not happen that way. All right? We have to battle. Just like Jesus battled his enemies. He battled the people that accused him. He battled the people that tried to kill him. And then at the end of the day, he went through a physical battle, an emotional battle. Pastor Adriana beautifully described it when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he was in agony, and he was in torture, and he was suffering, and he was in pain. And I can guarantee you the religious leaders were doing what they do today. Well, if they're in so much agony and pain and trial, they must not be of God. If they were really serving God, they wouldn't be having problems. Well, you just talking about Jesus. He willingly sacrificed himself. He willingly went through a transition. So he goes with his three again, because these are the people that saw him be transfigured. You would think that by now they would get, when Jesus calls us away, really cool things happen. We should pay attention. They go up there and they nap. They got complacent. So in Matthew 26:36, it says, then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to the disciples, sit here while I go pray over there. And he took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, and he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. And then he said, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death. Stay here and watch with me. So he even told them, Like, I am struggling. I'm going through this horrible thing. Please pray for me. Please stay with me. And he went on a little bit further, and he said it, and he went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, "Oh, my Father, is it possible to let this cup pass from me? Nevertheless, not my will, but your will." And then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. Gee, thanks, guys. And said to Peter, "What? Could you not watch with me for 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter temptation." Even in that moment, he was thinking about Peter. Yeah, even I know you talked about the ear thing. She described that beautifully, that he saved Peter's life by putting the ear back on. But even in this, it's like he's about to die, and he's like, so that you don't enter into temptation, you should be keeping it together. He was still worried about him. I don't know, I'm a little more selfish than don't you know I'm about to die? Get it together, buddy. We're exposing Linda's flesh here. All right. Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Again, a second time he went away. I don't know about you. Now he probably would have got my attention, ooh, crud, I better stay up. I got in trouble. Again, a second time he went away and said, "Oh, my Father, if this cup cannot pass from me unless I drink it, it will be done." And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. So he left them, went away again. This time he didn't even rebuke him. He's like, all right. Went back and prayed again. And prayed the same words. And then he came to his disciples and said, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand. The Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise and let us keep going. My betrayers are at hand." He went through the most awful, hideous, terrible transition at a gruesome, horrible, terrible death. Who would think that would even lead you to greatness? Again, he went from greatness to earth, to attack, to humiliation, to gruesome, hideous, horrible death, which led him to be the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the one that's coming back on a white horse with a sword coming out of his mouth, the victorious Jesus that we were singing about. But that doesn't look like the path that leads to that. And yet in our life, we think it should look different. I got saved. Everything should go like this. There should be no downward spiral. It should only go up. And I'm not saying this to you, oh, well, I'm doomed to a horrible, hideous life. I'm just saying that as we go through those transitions, they prepare us to be who we were called to be. Joseph, being a slave and being a prisoner, taught him the leadership skills because he learned to be the best slave, the best prisoner that he could possibly be. He learned humility, which he clearly didn't have at the beginning. And all of those things caused him to be one of the greatest rulers that he could possibly be, because along the way he learned what it was like to be the slave. He learned what it was like to be the prisoner. He learned what it was like to be in abject poverty. He learned what it was like to be humbled. And because of his humility, he rose to the top, the best slave, the best prisoner. We look at our lives, and if we can keep our eyes on what is, yes, God's given you a dream. God, give me the desires of your heart. Sometimes it's our desires, but sometimes it's like, God, you put desires in my heart. Because my heart could have desires for things that are not godly. And then we try to hold God to that standard and tell God, well, you told me you'd give me the desires of my heart, and I desire a Ferrari. And God's like, that ain't me, sweetie. And it might be. I have nothing wrong. There is nothing wrong with having a nice car. Okay, I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying, is it what God called you to have? Because the Bible says that our hearts are wicked. It says that we were born into sin. So some of my desires, if they don't line up with his desires, could just be my desires. I desire that really hot girl or that really hot guy. Of course, they're already married, but that could be the desire of your heart. And don't laugh. I've heard people say that. They're like scamming on somebody that's already married. They're like, oh, God told me that that's my spouse. That's my future husband or wife. I'm like, they're married? But God said he would give me the desires of my heart, and that's... And you think I'm joking? I've actually I've heard people say that. Yes?
Yeah, Jane Hammond actually said that happened in her church.
Yes. I know you guys are like, no. Yes. All the desire. And they try to quote Bible and say, but God promised to give me the desires of my heart. Get it together. Stop being stupid. But it may not be that obvious, but what if whatever it is you're desiring isn't God? So let's make sure that your desires line up with God. God, you put in me the desires that I'm supposed to have. Because The path to get to your goals, the path to get to your dreams doesn't always take the path that we think, because it doesn't make sense, because it's how God led us there. Like I said, some of the worst things that have happened to me have led me to this moment, and if this horrible thing, like that I would have in a heartbeat traded, like I wish this hadn't have happened to me, but the betrayals, the backstabbing, the just horrific stuff back here, even from 25 years ago, 30 years ago, would have led me to not be here, which would have led me to not have met you, which would have led a good chunk of, 3/4 of you to not be here, which would let us not to have this building, which would have, and it was because I was betrayed 25 years ago. Now I can look back and be like, oh, I get it. In the middle of it, I was not thinking about y'all. Well, I'm going through this, but it's for these amazing people that God's bringing into my life. No, they were just idiots. I couldn't see the bigger picture, but that bigger picture led me here, which led me to this moment, which leads you guys to your future, because, and not that I'm all holy, because I know that you all have had the same kind of things happen in your life, that if this hadn't have happened, this hadn't have happened, which wouldn't have put you here, which wouldn't have put your generations on the path that they need to be, okay? So I'm not trying to make it about me, because it's not just about me. Every single one of us, I can guarantee if I sat down with you, have a story, whether it's of abuse, whether it's of neglect, whether it's of disaster, that led you to this moment. And if you're in the middle of a trial and you're like, well, this moment sucks, remember that this moment, if you keep your eyes on Jesus, can lead you to the moment where you are supposed to be. We're all in different places. We're all in different places. Okay, so right now I'm not in this moment, but it's what led to this one. But right now you might be in that horrible moment, and you have a decision to make. You have a decision to make that I'm going to go through the valley of the shadow of death. I'm going to go through this in my job. I'm going to go through this with my husband. I'm going to go through this with my wife or my children. I'm going to go through it, or I'm going to stand at the edge and live a mediocre life for the rest of my life because the transition is too hard. Because transitions are hard. Even if they're positive ones, they're hard. And not all transitions are negative. But trust me, don't get so caught up. Jesus, this is my beloved son, and into the wilderness. We have to be present to the moment of each day. There was a moment of this, and then there was a wilderness. Don't get it twisted because the enemy comes up and says, well, you're under attack, because that wasn't really a word of God. Okay, so we have to encourage each other through that moment. And if you don't want to do that, my last little disclaimer, and I will end here. If you don't want to go through and you just want to be saved and you just want to stand at the edge and watch everybody else, and you have fun. I'm not going to push you either, because there's been people that have said, well, how come you push? Or how come you're always speaking into so-and-so's life? Or how come? Because they want to go through and I'm trying to help them go through. Go. Come on. You could do it. Keep going. But if you want to just stand at the edge, the Holy Spirit gives you a choice. It's not my job to do anything other than that. And I love you, and you'll make it to heaven, and it's that. That's between you and God, because nobody can make you do something you don't want to do. But I want to encourage you that if what's holding you back is thinking that that's a lot of work, it is. You're welcome. You're not wrong, it's work, but it's for a much greater purpose. Everything Joseph went through was a lot of work so that he could rule a nation and free a people. What you're going through is so that you can, well, I'm not called to do that. You're called to do that in your sphere, in your sphere of influence. Some of you are called to speak to multitudes. Some of you are called to be pillars and backbones here in this house so that we can raise up children, so that you, whether it's children's church, whether it's at your job, and I'm not talking about just ministry church-wise, I'm talking at your job. Maybe you're called to be the backbone in your company so that you can be a spiritual pillar to the people that may never walk into a church, but they'll walk into your office because you're their boss or you're their coworker. It's putting ourselves out to be the best wherever we're at, the best prisoner. Joseph was the best prisoner, the best slave. And when you're at your job, you might feel like you're a slave. So be the best slave you could be, because people are looking at you, and you're going to rise to excellence. And the people that are happy and mediocre are going to not like you. People that are comfortable and mediocre, you make them look bad. When Rob used to go back into the office for more work at the end of the day because he worked for the county, and they'd give him a pile of work and say, get this done, all the other guys would finish the pile of work, and I'm going to say the word, in Malibu, go find a tree. Those of you that know me know why that's funny. My husband's obsessed. That's my fault. We left Malibu. All right. We didn't live in Malibu. He just worked there. They'd go find a tree or they'd go find a beach and they'd go do whatever. But Rob, because he had a higher authority, which is God that saw him sitting under a tree, would march back into the office and be like, I'm finished with the day's work. His bosses would be like, oh. He had one boss that would be okay with it. His other boss would actually tell him, dude, stop. Get out of here. Like, you're making everybody else look bad. And his coworkers would get ticked off because, well, if Enos is finished with his job, where are all the rest of you slackers? He made a lot of enemies just by doing the right thing, but he was still obligated to do the right thing. So people may not like you when you do the right thing because it accentuates how they're not doing the right thing. I've actually gone back into a store and told them they overcharged me, and they got mad at me. They were, because I caused them more work, and they're like, and like I'm like, really? Really? I'm like trying to be honest. People don't like it when you're honest because it causes them more work. But who's your authority? Who's watching you? Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Joseph was in prison. Who cares if I'm a good prisoner or I'm a bad prisoner? I'm a prisoner, but he was the best prisoner. So be the best at everything you do so that people can see Jesus in you, so that you can. That one divine appointment, that one time that the right person is watching can transform your life or their lives, or a lot of people's lives, right? How many times have you had God moments where you like didn't know and people were like, I watched what you did, or I overheard what you were saying? People watch who you are. The people that want to rise to the occasion will get better for it. The people that resent you for it probably are slackers and you're just making them look bad. But you just keep doing what God's called you to do. All right? So when your transitions are painful and they hurt, it's because you're stretching into something more. And you don't always have to, Jesus only took the 3 sometimes. But he did. Even Jesus had that core that was praying with him. Okay? We need one another to encourage one another to be everything that God's called us to be. All right? So transitions aren't fun. In fact, that's one of the things they said about Rob's book was the publisher, Jennifer LeClaire actually put him in touch with her publisher and was like, this is great. The publisher read the book and was like, this is amazing. This is really good. And we were going back and forth like, oh my gosh, this is going to happen. Like it's published, but published more like from a mainstream publisher. And the publisher loved it, got to the end of it and went, it's fantastic and the body of Christ needs to read this. But because it's hard hitting and it talks about this kind of stuff, but we don't have an audience for it because people don't want to hear it. So they from a business standpoint couldn't press through because people don't want to hear that they have to change. They want to hear how God's just going to rain down blessings and everything's all good. Unfortunately, it's sad because they're not going to get to where they need to be either, because has that happened magically in anybody's life? Not that I know of. So we're just praying, you know what, God, we're going to keep preaching the truth because I want to see you guys excel in everything that you do. Whether it's your personal life, your work life, your spiritual life, I want you guys to be the change that needs to take place in you. And whatever that costs to do, I want God to do. And that's a scary prayer. When I hear people go, God, do whatever you want in my life, I'm like, oh, that's terrifying. I've prayed that prayer. And I've seen people go up at altar calls going, give your whole life to Jesus. And people are like, because they get caught up in the moment. I'm like, oh my God, do you know what you're doing? I remember standing on top of a stadium where like hundreds of people are flooding. And the guy didn't tell him there was a cost. He was just like, who's going to follow Jesus? Yes, to whatever Jesus says. And everybody's all excited because it was a really pumped message. And everybody's like, yes, we'll do whatever Jesus says. He didn't tell him what that cost. And I'm standing because it was a huge stadium, and I'm like looking down going, ooh, those people are in trouble. Because whether they know what comes with that price or not, it still comes. So that person did not do that. You know where it says count the cost? Those people were not counting the cost. They were like, yes, I just want that. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Ouch. It's kind of like you get the prophetic word, and everybody's like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, it's work. I'm not saying that to scare you, but if you're aware of it, you're like, I could take this on. Like the Israelites, I am well able. I'm going to do this. So this is not a discouraging message. If I know what's in front of me, I know what to expect. When you go to the bicycle class, you know that there's warfare in front of you. You don't go in there and go, what the heck is happening? But if you're prepared, even mentally, right? I got this. We're going to pump each other. We got this. If I
you're like, do I got this?
right, but you make a conscious decision. You make a conscious decision as opposed to, I don't know what to expect. And too many people go into rose-colored glasses. If I accepted Jesus, and everything's going to be fine. Liar. Satan hates you. But if we know that, I can fight an enemy that I know is there. When the military goes into warfare, they don't go in there thinking there's not going to be resistance. That would be stupid. So they're prepared for the resistance. I'm trying to prepare you for the resistance so that you go in there going, no, I know this is a battle, and I'm going to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. So get out of my way. It's a victory thing. If I'm going through this attack, I don't want you to be caught off guard, like in a haunted house where the ghouls jump out in front of you, and you're like, ah! Like, it's there. It's like, get out of my way. I got places to go, things to do. That's the attitude we have to have. If I'm going through this transition, whatever it may look like.
So,
all right?
I just wanted to share that as in the beginning, I believe in the beginning of the year, I was already sewing into Beauty for Ashes. It was like the $20 that I was able to do at the time. But obviously you guys know that I'm single, so I had been struggling since I had separated. And I was just like, God, I'm sewing. I do 20% because that's like God told me. He's like, I want you to sew. And I'm like, okay, I'll do this. But I just wanted to share that God really spoke to my heart to let go of a ministry that I was sewing into for 3 years, a big ministry that I was sewing into. And he said, no, I want you to, because A-Rob had spoke about honor the ministries that are in the house. And I took that to heart because I said, okay, no, I need to do what is asked of us to do. So I said, God, okay, I'll let this go. He told me, let this one go. And of course, the next month, I contacted them and I told them, to drop. But the minute I sewed into Beauty for Ashes, a little bit of warfare came, but God's like, no. At first I was like, oh my God, I made a mistake, And he's like, no, wait. And ever since I have not been paycheck to paycheck. And so I was floored. So totally, I just set your heart right, because at first it was just like, you think to yourself, like the flesh is like, oh, I just, for the money, but it's like, no. God's like, check your heart, and I had to do that too, but I just guarantee that sewing into that has blessed my life, my family, and I even sharing it with my personal family and getting them to, okay, because they are seeing it in my life, So definitely.